This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We are internet friends turned real-life friends who both experienced the tragic loss of our sons to sudden infant death syndrome in winter of 2021.
In the year after Aiden died, my husband and I both became unemployed. My parents divorced, and we had to move 5 times for various reasons.
And as for me, just a few weeks before my son Quinn died, my then husband had come out to me as a transgender woman and were subsequently divorcing.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
But as long as we're living, we will love our sons deeply and work to make sure that we live a life that makes them proud.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here. Okay,
Right,
let me
Judith.
just send this one email.
This is also classic As Long As
I
I'm
know.
Living podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Every time Judith calls me, I wonder if this is the same for you. She's like, I'm like, hello? She goes, hang on, I'm walking the dog.
I know.
Pretty much.
That's just classic Judith always.
Always.
She's a multitasker.
Like, you called
right,
me.
Judith? I know,
It drives
exactly.
my mom crazy. Okay, hi guys. Okay,
Hi.
so, should I give like an introduction?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I know that I can't see you, but I know you can see me. I just need to find it in the tab. Oh, okay, here you guys are. I have found you. Okay. Hi everyone. Today we have a very special guest on the podcast, my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friend Miriam. I would say a best friend, but I'm starting to worry that I say that for all these guests of ours and like it's losing its power. But really Miriam is a best friend. And
I'm gonna say in the very first episode of this podcast, Judith, you gave a shout out to Miriam because you needed new bras and
and Miriam
Oh
sent them.
my gosh,
Miriam
almost
sent me all
forgot
sorts of
about
clothes.
that.
And
I almost forgot. I'm
you
so
know
glad,
what?
Alina, you reminded us of that.
I'll say that if you listen to this podcast, you will hear me talk about Miriam a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. So I think many of you guys who listen to this podcast weekly already know her and her wisdom and her brilliance and just her big, generous, loving heart. And so I'm excited to introduce you to everyone, Miriam, because they all know you, but you don't know our community. But I think they'll fall in love with you too.
I am so excited to be here. I literally feel it's an honor and a privilege to get to be on the show because I am an avid listener.
Avid listener.
I want to know what you think first because I'm
Okay,
curious if we have the same memory.
It was 8th grade. I know it was 8th grade because we met. Miriam and I went to the same high school, but we met like a few weeks before we took the test to get into the high school. There was like a weekend like thing through our synagogue, and so we went and that was the first time we met.
100% agree.
I don't remember what it was, but we were met there.
I'm so surprised you remember that.
I do.
Remember the moment Judith and I met. We were in 8th grade, so think like we must have been 12. You know, we must have been like little children. And I think we were outside my house, and Judith just walks up to me, and she's like, "Hi, I'm Judith," like that. And I was so like disarmed. Like Judith is just such a warm person. It's hard not to love her from the first time you meet her. So it was. I remember feeling like this is a great person. We're gonna be friends.
We're gonna be friends. I had that feeling. We're gonna be friends, and then we saw each other when we were testing to get into this high school. And like we still were friends. Like it wasn't weird.
Yeah. You're not a weird person, Judith. You're very friendly. But I'm a very shy person, so I might have been the type of 12-year-old who'd be like, "Oh, we met," but I don't know if she remembers that we met. So like I'm afraid to wave at her, you know. So I would like put my head sort of down, but Judith is just like, "Hi, like we met last week," you know. So she's that presence. So
but
anyway,
we went to high school together, and I think something that's unique about my relationship with Miriam is that we did not have any of the same hobbies. Like
that's true.
I was in sports. You didn't do sports.
No.
I don't know what I don't know what I did in high school, but I was very busy doing something, and I remember that you weren't in those activities with me.
True, and
we did other things together.
Yeah, and I would also say it's interesting because sometimes your friends in high school, it's like a group of friends. And Judith and I feel like we were always very one-on-one friends. Like we didn't have necessarily the same friends group, or you're not best friends with other people who I would consider best friends, and I'm not best friends with your best friends, but
we just had our own thing.
We had our own thing.
We did our own thing. I'll tell you what I think part of it was. First of all, I've always just really liked Miriam. But second of all, neither of our parents had a lot of rules. That was another thing. Like, there were days I would just disappear at Miriam's house, and my parents wouldn't ask any questions, and her parents didn't ask any questions.
They're just like, oh, Judith lives here for a few days.
I don't know why my parents weren't asking what we were doing, but they weren't. And your parents, we'd come home at like 4 a.m, and our dad would be like on his laptop and be like, hey, how was the movie?
I remember that exact moment. It's a classic story. Like, how was the movie? We're like, Dad, the movies aren't open at 4.
Wait, I have to know. What were you doing at 4 a.m?
Who knows what we were doing?
You don't even want to know.
We were like driving around the neighborhood. Okay. Miriam and I used to sneak into, there was this fancy hotel, a very fancy hotel, and we would sneak in for the day and go swimming. And like we would just walk in.
We were like, be confident. Like, we're patrons here. We're guests.
We just walked into the pool and spent the day by the pool, me and Miriam, and no one thought twice about it. We just enjoyed our day.
No, but Judith, we would buy like a drink not an alcoholic drink, but like a Coke,
a lemonade or something. 16. And we did pay for the valet.
And we paid exactly. We did give them some business. We paid like $20 for $5 for our day. At the pool, but it was.
I have to say, I think one of the things our listeners are going to love about these episodes is I am loving these little sneak peeks into like the Judith that from before, and I think our listeners who like kind of know us a little bit now are going to love to hear like these like little side stories about what we were like before,
before.
And then we went to high school together, and then we went to college together. But even and then we like the same thing in college. Like we had our own worlds, but we were also friends. And then after college, we both lived in New York. And then I would say somewhere around that time, like I moved out of New York. And I feel like Miriam, like we just didn't talk so often. Like I'd say in the years leading up to the loss, like I don't think we spoke rarely once on our birthdays, or I would see you, when your son was born, when your oldest son was born. I know I was in New York for work and I came to see you. But it was like, we didn't talk to each other for like months on end, and then I would see you, and it was as if nothing changed.
Agreed.
Just picked up.
Completely agreed. I think we always maintained our friendship. It never felt awkward when we reconnected, but I completely agree. It wasn't like we were in touch on a daily basis, not even a weekly basis, right?
Not even a monthly basis.
We could have been out of touch for a little bit, and then we would catch up, and it felt like no time passed. And it always felt very normal to reconnect. But leading up to the loss, Judith, I do remember we were connected in the days leading up to it.
But I know why, because Miriam was a mom first.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I know that like when Aiden was born, like you like were there. You were like involved, like you were talking about nursing bra, like normal mom things, nursing bras or whatever we were talking about. Like I would ask you questions, and then like what normal moms do.
Yeah. So that must have been how we reconnected. I remember the days before Aiden died, we were on the phone. We were talking about a trip you were planning to take with Aiden. And I think you were going to fly alone with him. And we were talking about tips just for flying on the plane.
Yeah, because I was going to come to New Jersey. So I must have planning to see you. I was going to come 2 weeks later. Yeah. Yeah, and you told me, you're like, Judith, and this is good advice. You're like, if you're ever delayed, you're going to need enough formula for days. She's like, don't just bring a few. Bring enough formula for like 10 days, just in case you get stuck. That was good advice.
Yeah, no, I learned that the hard way. So I'm happy to pass that along. So
let's talk about that day.
Yeah. So if any of this gets too much or is emotional, feel free to stop me at any point.
And same to you as well. You can feel free to stop. I know it's emotional for the friends also.
Yeah. Okay. So a few days before Aiden died, we were speaking about that trip. I remember, Judith, the night before he died, we were on the phone for a while.
Because we were talking about trying to set up our friend.
We were talking about trying to set up our friend.
Who's now engaged.
who is now engaged. But at the time, right, we were talking about who can we set her up with? Very normal conversation, right? Like there was just no sense of what was about to happen, right? Of course, it was just like normal, fun conversation. And I remember the next morning, Judith, so this is the morning of March 4th now. We were texting in the morning. It was a little later. I was in New York, so there was a time difference. So I guess first thing when you woke up, we were continuing our conversation from the night before. We were texting a little bit. And I was at my desk, and I'll never forget that moment. And you texted me, Aiden died last night. And my heart stopped. And my first reaction was, oh, I have to reread this. Like something, this can't be what I think it is. And I was trying to think, could she meant Aiden cried last night? I was trying to think, how could this text message make sense in my mind? And my first response actually was, I called you. I don't know if you remember. I was just so completely shocked. And I called you and I just said, Judith, you just texted me Aiden died last night. And you said, Miriam, I told you he died. And I just remember that feeling of your heart sinking and not believing that this can be real life, like thinking you're in a bad dream. And then you told me, I have to go. Please tell my other friend, your other best friend who was living in LA with you at the time. So I was in New York and you had a best friend who was living in LA with you. So I called your other friend and she was incredible and rushed over to your apartment where you were at the time and I remember feeling so helpless in New York, just like there was nothing I could do. I was so far away from Judith in that moment, right? I was 3,000 miles away. And I remember feeling really helpless because there's just nothing that you can do. Or I felt in that moment like there was nothing I could do. So I quickly booked a flight and I left the next morning.
Did you think like, should I go? Should I not go? Or you were just like, I'm going?
That's a great question, Judith. I think I did waver. Should I go? Should I not go? Not for personal reasons. I think I had never had a friend who had suffered a traumatic loss suddenly and the loss of a child. It was a completely new, there's no book for what to do when this happens.
Yeah.
And so I just wasn't sure, like, would you want visitors? Would you want me, of all people, at your house the next day? Would it be too much for you? But ultimately, I decided I'll go for the weekend. And if you don't want me, I won't be there. You know, like, we'll play it by ear. I'll go. And if it's clear that Judith wants space, no harm. Like, I'll give you that space. But then at least I had the opportunity to be there. And in retrospect, I do think it was the right choice to go.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Judith?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. And I know that you and my other friend, like, were talking a lot. Like, she was there, like, on the grounds. And, like, I know that you guys were talking a lot. So,
yes.
It wasn't
absolutely.
Like, yeah.
Like, I was texting her throughout the day. Her main priority was you and also your family. So, and you've spoken about this on the podcast before about the idea of the concentric circles and like who needs to be there. So of course Judith is in the center and then your family is right on the outside of that. And then your friend was supporting you and your family actually that day. Yeah. Sure. There were like a lot of arrangements that needed to be made. And of course, while everyone was supporting you, everyone was looking for help and guidance and what do we do? And so I know that your friend was amazingly helpful. And I was just texting her throughout the day, what can I do? How are they doing? So I was definitely thinking of you, obviously, and thinking of ways that I could be helpful. But I did think that being there was the most important. I still sort of feel that way.
And so then you showed up the next day.
I just
showed up on Friday.
I showed up on Friday. And I do remember thinking, because I was in touch with other people, actually, Judith, and you probably don't know this, but Aiden died Thursday morning, and my middle child's birthday was that Saturday. March 6th is his birthday. So we had invited a bunch of people over on Saturday for like a little get together. And then we canceled it at the last minute. Of course, I was in California. So when I was relaying the news to everyone, like, don't come anymore, we're canceling this little get together, they asked us why. And so, I had told them that my friend suffered a loss. And a lot of them were surprised that I was going. And I think to an outsider who's never had a friend suffer a loss like this, they might think, why would you feel like welcome there? Like, maybe your friend wants space. Maybe, they don't want their friend from childhood who we're not even in touch every week to show up at their house the next day. And I think some people felt like, when there's like a burning building or disaster, like you sort of run away from the disaster. Like your first response is to run away. And so it did somewhat feel like I was running too. Like, I needed to be there. I needed to help however I could. Yeah. But it definitely felt like I was nervous, Judith. I didn't know how you were going to react to seeing me the next morning at your house.
Yeah. And I don't remember much about that Friday. I know you were in the dining room, and I know you were doing something with a friend. I don't know what you were doing, but you were just like sitting there. I don't know. Yes. You guys were doing something. But I do remember Saturday night.
Yes.
A lot.
I remember that too.
Because Saturday night you came over. There's two things I want to say. First of all, Miriam helped me write my speech for Aiden's funeral. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure she helped me write. First of all, Miriam's an incredible writer. That's one thing. Second of all, I think she also helped me write the Facebook post, maybe. Like, maybe I sent that to her too. But for sure, she helped me write the funeral speech. And, like, I think that's a very difficult task to burden a friend with. I don't want to say burden, but that's a huge ask for me to ask you to help me write my son's funeral speech and, like, listen to it for, like, grammar and listen to it for, like, concepts and, like, visual imagery. Like, I know it was emotional for both of us, but that was not easy. And I think, like, the intensity of the feelings that I was feeling, you kind of had to step in with me. And that was a big ask. And like, I acknowledge.
I'm feeling really emotional as you're talking about that, because as someone who has also written a funeral speech for their son, it's an excruciating task, because you're trying to capture the essence of somebody that most of these people who are going to hear this never met, right?
And Miriam never met Aiden.
Yes. And then
that's true.
And then you're also trying to hold it together while you're saying it, because you have to get the words out. And then you're also, I mean, it's like, you want to be eloquent, you want to do them justice. Like, it's a huge task. And the thing that's funny is, like, expectations are low, right? Like, nobody's going into it like expecting, like, that I have a dream speech, something really fantastic. But as you're writing it, it feels like the only thing you can do to parent them at that moment. So I can imagine like sitting with Judith, and that was probably really hard and beautiful, but hard.
Yeah.
So hard.
I mean, I would say it never feels like a burden. It never feels like a burden with Judith. It feels like whatever happens to Judith happens to us. Like, we're friends. So if something is going on with one person, of course the other person's going to be there. And I know that if the tables were turned, Judith would be there for me. I think being there for someone who just lost a child, you need to crawl into the cave with them. Like, this is a concept that we've spoken about on the podcast. And I think to be there, Judith, for you in those days following the loss, just meant to be there with you. Whatever was going on with you, was going on with me. I was just there. I was just there to support you and hold your hand through this, horrible experience. It felt scary. It felt so sad. Like, I remember after we wrote that speech together, like, I remember after we got off the phone, I just got into the bed and cried for so long. Even though I never met Aiden, I still carry his loss, and I feel his loss, and I feel it through you, Judith. Like, I feel that I know him through you. And I feel like in those days following the loss, like I did get to know him, and you spoke to him about me in that Saturday night when we were together. Just to zoom out, I guess, for the listeners, the timeline was that Aiden died on Thursday morning. I showed up at Judith's house on Friday. I know you mentioned, Judith, I was there Friday, but I'd like to go into that a little more, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah.
How this sort of looked chronologically, because it'll set the stage for what happens later. So on Friday, I showed up at Judith's house, and I remember coming in, and Judith, honestly, it didn't seem like you were surprised to see me. It seemed almost, it seemed almost like Judith was like a ghost. And I think I've told you this before, Judith, like, you were physically there, but you were not there. Emotionally, mentally, you were in a different space. And we were all sitting with you and trying, of course, just to comfort you just by being there, but you weren't there. You were somewhere else. And there was actually this one moment, Judith, that you looked over to me and you said something like, I really don't know how I'm going to make it for the next 2 minutes, for the next 10 minutes. Can you tell me something about you? Just say something, basically, like, distract me from this moment. And I started telling you, Judith, about this movie that I watched on the plane called Bombshell. and Judith, like, this spark came back to her eyes for a second. It was like you weren't, it was like almost for a second that old Judith, like, came back up and was thinking about, like, women's rights and that movie, and something that would have excited Judith, right? Like, pre-loss, this is something we would have spoken about. And I saw that spark come to your eyes for a second. And then, of course, something, you were called away, or there was a reminder of Aiden. Like, it was a second. But I wanted to bring that up because that was Friday, was just basically surviving the day minute by minute and just trying to be there for you physically by sitting there with you. And then Saturday, I didn't see you at all. But then I came over on Saturday night, and it was just me and you. And we had the opportunity to sort of be alone and grieve together. And that's when you asked me, Judith, like, you were afraid that you would never be you again. Like you said, I feel like my whole life has changed overnight. And you're like, I'm always going to be this, like, ghost or shell of a person. And we were crying together, and I told you that wasn't going to be the case for you. And I said, because I still see you. I still see the old Judith. And I reminded you of that moment when I told you about Bombshell, and how, like, and how for a second you smiled at me. Like, when I said that story, you smiled at me with, like, that Judith smile that I know, that just genuine, like, there's no other way to describe it, as just, like, it was such a Judith smile, and just so genuine and warm and excited. And I said, you're still there, Judith. Like, you went through something absolutely horrible, and you're still Judith. I think I said that over and over, like, you're still Judith, and you will be Judith, and you'll continue to be you.
And I think you were, like, the only person that would say that to me, because I think everyone else was afraid that I also was going to be gone. My mom, my sister, everyone else thought I was going to be, like, disappear from the universe. I don't think that they had the faith that I would come back. And you were the only person who said, like, you're still you. And I remember that just being so comforting. And over the course of many months, I held on to that. I was like, Miriam still sees me. Like, and I think that by far is the key to why I think that this loss brought us closer together. And I also think that you're the one person who just did it right. Like, you did everything right. And I think it's because the entire time you saw me and the entire time, like, you still wanted to be my friend. And you didn't run away from it. You just sat. You just sat there and it didn't feel like a burden. You never made me feel like a burden. You always just made me really feel like you wanted to hear it. You know, you weren't scared of my loss. You just were like, this is what my friend wants to talk about, you know? Like, I still like her. I still want to be her friend.
We're all hysterical.
I just think that, you know, it felt so good to feel like someone saw me and loved me for me. And I didn't have to be anything else. I didn't have to do anything else. And I could be as sad as I was and as torn up as I was. And you were just like perfectly content to be my friend.
Yeah.
And then after, in like the months after, I know I spent a lot of time talking to you about trying to get pregnant again. And I would like send you pictures of like all the sticks and we would like analyze them. And you never told me I was crazy for trying to like get fertility treatments. You never told me I was crazy. You never told me like, Judith, do you want to think about trying to get pregnant again? Like, you just were like, okay, this is what she wants to do. Like, let's analyze sticks together. Like,
yeah,
let's look at this. Like, let's strategize about the best way to get pregnant. And like, that's what I wanted my friend to do. I didn't want anyone to tell me their thoughts. So they're like what they think I should be doing. I just wanted someone to analyze the stupid sticks with me and tell me like that I would get pregnant again. And that's what you did, like, for months. And I actually think another thing is that Miriam now she has 3 kids, but at the time she had 2 kids. Never one time did you mention your children to me. Not literally one time. I mean, your kids are very young in age and they're close together. And I'm sure it was chaos at times. And it was still COVID. And I remember the first time I asked you a question about yourself, you were buying your house. So maybe August. So like
wow.
from March to August, you
Right.
never mentioned your children, your family, your problems. You never mentioned anything about you.
Yeah.
Do you know that? Like,
Yeah.
who does that?
No, I'm glad you brought that up, Judith, because it was actually something I wrote a few notes I wanted to speak about, and that was one of them. Was I did do that, and I would say it's very deliberate. I mean, when you have a friend, for example, who's, let's say, trying to conceive or is infertile, and you yourself are pregnant, there's a certain sensitivity, right? Like, you want to be sensitive to your friend and your friend's needs, right? And you don't want to send them a birth announcement card with your baby's face on them. Like, I think there are certain common sense things. And I feel like, I mean, you did notice that I didn't mention my children. And I think it was deliberate, Judith, because it just wasn't the right time or place. And that doesn't mean there won't be a time or place, because Judith, our friendship has changed so much over the past year and a half since Aiden died. And I knew when Aiden died that this was a time that in our friendship, in the lifespan of our friendship, right? Like, we had been friends probably for 10 years before Aiden died.
Yeah.
And this was a time that you, Judith, needed me, and I needed to be there for you. And it didn't feel like a burden. It felt completely natural. Like, this is just a time in our friendship where the needs are that, Judith will vent to me, and I will just be this receptacle of a friend. I just wanted to be there for you. And it's what I wanted, Judith. I didn't want to complain about, my problems. They seemed so trivial compared.
But I think that sustained the ability to be giving for that long period of time is so unique and unbelievable. I mean, that I think is not only a good friend, but like a good special person. The ability to give of yourself every day. It wasn't like I talked to you once a week. I talked to you for hours every day. I would text you all day long. You had a job, you had 2 kids, you had a husband, you have like your own life. To give on that level for that period of time, like for 6 months, 7 months, without one time mentioning anything about yourself, meaning you didn't take from me and my energy at all for that period of time, to me is like, I think the hallmark of not only, like I said, a good friend, but I just think that that's like a special human being who can even do that. Like, that's a marathon. And that's like just an unbelievable quality, and I think a hallmark of what makes you a special person, because like you said, you didn't even feel it was a burden. Like, who does that?
No, but Judith,
I don't know how that's even possible. I don't think that I could be a good friend in that way at all. I don't think that anything I could give could repay that kind of sacrifice and generosity. Honestly, like I don't know what I did to deserve a friend like that, because like I can't even get my mom and my sister to pay attention to me for that long. Like the people who are obligated to love me, and you're choosing to do that.
yeah.
And I don't know how other people could. I don't know how you do it. I really don't know how you do it.
I mean,
and you continue to do it.
Judith, you're so sweet. I don't think this is deserved credit, because it really felt completely natural to me. Like, this is what I need to do. This is my job.
It wasn't just a friend. It wasn't just that you were a good friend in that way, but you also took unbelievable ownership to grieve Aiden as well. Miriam lights a candle for Aiden every week. On his birthday, she like dedicates, like for the schools, like the like something in her kids' schools for him, like without my prompting, without my idea. She just does it. For his birthday, she got me a massage. Like, she just paid for herself. She sent me countless meals. She sent me, like, I needed bras. She sent me bras, but she also sent me maternity jeans and other shirts and clothes. And like, anything that I needed, she didn't ask twice. She just did it. And then she thought of things I didn't even know I needed. And she did that too.
Jude, you're making me blush. Like, I'm
It's
embarrassed.
the truth. I don't know how you financially sustained my needs, but you just.
I don't either. I don't look too closely at that. No, I'm joking. But it was.
But it's true. You probably went into debt for Aiden.
But you know what, Jude? I think part of it is because it made me feel better in a way. It's like a selfish act of feeling like I could do something to support you. And the loss is so enormous that there's nothing we can do to bring him back. And I felt his loss too, individually, like apart from our friendship. I was affected by his loss. And I think, we've spoken about how I would be at work and I would just be zoning out, like, none of this matters.
Yeah.
Like, Aiden died. None of this matters. And feeling like I was able to help in some small way.
Yeah.
Sending a meal.
We frequently say, like, the grief supporter, your role is not to fix the loss, but just to make them comfortable. And like, attempts to fix the loss are not welcome. Things like, well, at least they're blah, 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 blah. Anything that like winds up like wanting to try to make them feel better about the loss, I feel like do not land well. It just doesn't feel good. But making them more comfortable while they do their own work in their head, I think, is what feels really good, or as good as possible in the aftermath of a tragedy.
I think, Miriam, also, you made a really big effort to learn this new vocabulary. Like, the way that Alina and I speak to one another, it's like in this convoluted way, and you like learned that whole language. Like, you'll say to me, Judith, it's like, remember why you're a superwoman? Like, you'll like come to me and you'll like use this language a lot. Like you said, with the concentric circles, and you've read lost books. Like, you would listen to this podcast so you could be a better friend. Like,
even if it wasn't me and Judith, like, I feel like you would listen to a podcast by two people to support Judith.
For sure. Of course she would. She would follow grief accounts, and she would send me like things from, she's like, I found this great grief account. Look at this meme. It made me think of like you were all in. Were all in.
Yeah, but it's because, Judith, it felt like it was happening in a way to both of us. And I don't mean that to detract from your loss at all, because I know that Aiden was your son, but I did feel his loss individually. Like, I did feel in a way I was grieving with you and I was grieving too. And it just felt natural to this is the new world we were living in. Like, I remember once being on the phone with you, Judith, and we said, you said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where this is all going. I don't know what my life is going to look like in 6 months from now. And I remember saying to you that I don't know either, but we're in this together, and like whatever road you're on, like I'm on it with you, and we're just going to hold hands and we're just going to face it together. And I meant that, and I still mean that. And I don't think that there was more that a friend can do in that moment, because saying, imagining where you would be in 6 months from then, it didn't feel like a service to you. It just felt like, this is the moment we're in now, and I'm here with you now, and I don't know what life is going to look like, because the truth is I didn't know. I didn't know if you were going to get pregnant again. I didn't know if you would still, be grieving Aiden's loss the same today as you would in 6 months from now, as you would in 6 years from now. I just knew that the one thing I could tell you was that we're in this together and you're not alone. And I still feel that what a friend can do for another friend when they're in a traumatic point in their life, whether it's the loss of a son or a cancer diagnosis or losing a parent, right? No matter what happens in the course of our friendships, there will be hardships in life, right? One of our friends is going to go through a hardship, and we don't know how that hardship is going to play out. But the only thing that we can know and control is how much we choose to be there for that person in the moment. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's what we did, Judith. I feel like our friendship evolved after the loss.
It did. And I think it's one of those things where we're stronger and closer now than ever before, in a way that felt like really transformative for our relationship for many years to come. Like, I think that it's going to kind of stay in this close way. I think that many relationships, many friendships, either change for the worse, or they're taking a lot of space from each other, or just completely disintegrate. But I think there are some people, like, if you can make it on this journey with your friend, your relationship will evolve into something more beautiful, more special, and better than it was before. It's almost like do or die, like,
yeah,
either you're gonna come on and we're gonna like figure this out and make it even better, or it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I think that I think that is special about our relationship. I also think that one thing that you said is, which makes me feel good, is like, things are gonna happen, and we still have many, many more years to go. And like, I hope you never need my friendship back, but like, we have, let's say, 60 years of us. Like, things are gonna happen, and I will repay. I don't think it's like a repaying thing, but like, you weren't looking at it as like, Judith isn't meeting my needs right now. Like, if you can keep it long term and be like, okay, well, this is a friend who's been through the shit. So when I go the shit, she's going to show up for me, and she knows how to do it. Mm-hmm. So like, don't give up on your friends that have, are going through this. Even if they can't be there for you right now, like, that might be, one day you might need them in return, and and I can sit in this shit with you.
Of course, but I was gonna say, like, if you're the type of friend that you're gonna bail on your friends when they have a hard time, you don't truly have many friends, right? Like, mm-hmm. It's a give and take. I know, Judith, if the tables were turned, that it would have been the same, but reverse. Like, I could have called you every day for 3 months, and I know you would have listened to me. I feel like it is a test of a true friendship, right? Like, are we fair weather friends? Or mm-hmm. And actually, you know what? I want to caveat this for listeners who are friends who aren't sure how to be there for their grieving person. And I do want to say that perhaps for me, I have a certain level of comfort approaching hard feelings, mm-hmm. and other people might not.
Yeah.
So I want to be careful before I say.
I think this also plays into your natural skill set.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Not that you don't work on it, but you also are able to sit still, and it doesn't affect you in the way that maybe it affects others.
Yeah. I don't want to make anyone feel like if they hesitate to reach out to that grieving person that there's something wrong with them and they're a fair weather friend. I don't think it's that simple. I think that I have less of I have more of a tolerance for like getting into hard, sticky, mm-hmm. feelings with other people, right? And some people might feel more cautious or afraid to open themselves up, or they may have their own personal hesitancies, right? And I don't want to make them feel like they're not good friends. I think that,
and also some people, depending on where they are in their life circumstances, they may not have the bandwidth to be there in the same way that you were for Judith. Like some people just are suffering on their own for some reason with something major, and they are not able to show up in exactly that same way with that same magnitude. But of course, it doesn't mean they don't care, or circumstances are keeping you apart for some reason. Like I know in our interview with Julia, it was really interesting. Like that was hard. She was pregnant within her first child, a son.
Yeah.
Like that's hard.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's actually true for my friend Julia. My friend Julia was pregnant with her first child when this happens. Like this is it's a hard, painful road to walk, and you can be willing to walk it, but not capable of walking it. Or vice versa. You can be capable and not willing. And I think capable and not willing is the fair weather friend.
Right. I also think, just building off of what you said, Alina, I also feel that there may be a lack of perspective allowing a friend to be there for you as much as they can be in those circumstances. So I remember Judith had a friend who really wanted to be there for her, but that friend didn't have any children, was not even approaching parenthood, and just couldn't like relate to that magnitude of a loss without even imagining herself as a mother. I think there was just a disconnect between you. As much as she wanted to be there for you, she wasn't able to understand what it was like to lose a child when children were just so far off her radar.
Yeah.
So I think it was like the perfect storm of combination of things that allowed us to, I don't want to put too much pride and say, oh, I was this great friend. Like, I think we had the perfect recipe, right? We had a strong friendship beforehand. I felt comfortable showing up at your house the next day. Whereas, like, if we weren't friends since we were 12, maybe I wouldn't feel so comfortable just booking a flight and showing up at your house. And I was also a parent, so I was able to imagine what it was like for you in a way that I think other people may not have had that perspective.
And you know what else, Miriam? I don't know if you want me to say this, but you also been through infertility yourself. And I think that you knew the feeling of wanting a baby and not having one. And you had been through something hard also. And I think that experience allowed you to be so much more sensitive because you knew the pain and the agony. And then once you're pregnant, the anxiety. So I think that even though it had been time and you had 2 alive children at that point, that was a formative time for your life just to suffer yourself. You really suffered for those, whatever it was, months. And I think that because you knew that pain, it's not the same. I'm not sitting here and comparing it, but feelings weren't so unfamiliar. What else did you want to say? You took notes.
I did. There was only one thing I think we didn't cover, which was how our friendship changed even post like meeting Alina and this podcast.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It looks like
I would love to hear about that.
Yeah.
And I think there was a point, I think that there was a while, Judith, where, remind me when you two met, actually.
We met in person for the first time that July, but we like started texting and stuff like
June?
late May, early June.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. So I remember, Alina, when you came into Judith's life, I remember Judith was speaking to other lost parents throughout your journey, like even day one, you were on the phone with other lost parents. But I don't think you ever connected to anyone as much as you do to Alina. And I saw, Judith, that it was so nice for you to have someone like you would speak to me and I was so glad to be there for you, but I couldn't say, I know that feeling. I know, Judith. I've been on the floor myself. I couldn't say that because I haven't been on the floor myself. And I think having a friend like Alina who you could speak to when you were having a hard day, and Alina could say, I know, I've been there, and help you get through that was so incredibly helpful for you just in your healing, in the ups and downs of grief. I noticed we started speaking less, and not in a bad way. Like, I think it's incredible that you were able to shift some of that, those feelings to someone who is not only able to see you, but relate to and validate those feelings, like truly as someone who experienced them.
And who also happens to be a stranger from the internet.
But Miriam was not surprised about that part.
Yeah. I wasn't shocked. No. But I was so glad.
What did you think when I told you I was starting a podcast? Like, did you think this was ridiculous?
I was so shocked because that isn't something that would have been on Judith's radar if it weren't for you, Alina. Like, definitely this isn't something Judith thought of on her own.
Yeah. It was really her idea, but I will say I'm the one who's been executing it most of the time.
Alina. I would not have done it on my own. I definitely would not have.
It was your idea, though. She's the ideas woman.
But I do think that you're right. Like, I feel like our friendship kind of shifted when that happened. But like, to me, I was glad because I felt like it's a lot for you to carry. It was a lot for you to carry. And like, I don't think that you felt like, oh, someone took my spot. I felt like
No.
you were like, okay, at least I have other people who are going to help also, and we'll all take a piece.
Not at all. No, completely to the contrary. I didn't feel someone took my spot. I felt like I'm so glad that there's this new person in Judith's life who can understand Judith exactly. Like, they went through almost the exact same thing. I was so thrilled for you. But that was also, Judith, when you started like having more capacity in a different way in our friendship to ask me, what is going on in your life? Like, let's think. That was in August.
Yeah.
So it was like you guys met in May and you had this budding friendship, and you met in July, you said. Mm-hmm. And then like in those months, our friendship also evolved in a different way where it started to be a little more reciprocal. Yeah. And I'm not saying that was needed at that time. Like, I really feel I would have been Judith. We would have ridden it out however long it took. But I do feel having like different outlets for all of your feelings was helpful for you. Just have different capacity in your life for being there for Alina. Like, let's say, Alina, you called Judith in a hard moment, and Judith was able to be there for you. And I think it felt nice, Judith, for you to be there for someone.
Yeah. If I remember the first time we had
were there for you,
that conversation about the house, I think I said like, what's going on with your house? Like with you, and like you had like, you were buying a house. And I remember distinctly that conversation because I remember thinking like, I don't think I knew she was even looking for a house. Like,
yeah, right.
It was like such a shocking conversation to hear. Like, you'd put an offer, and there was like this construction thing, and like that was the first time I was able to expand my heart and my brain enough to hear your concerns about this construction, if they were going to approve the costs, and there were these lawyers, and like let's pay for the lawyers, and like. It was so remarkable that I even had the energy to like think and be concerned about your lawyer fees that it stood out to me. Like, it was a good sign to me. It showed signs of like progress that I could care about your house.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it showed signs, Judith, that things were changing for you in a way that like you weren't so deep in the throes of grief that there was nothing else around you, and you were just starting to peek your head out and be like, what is going on in the rest of the world? Like, and
what have I missed?
Yeah, what have I missed? And I think part of that was our friendship obviously grew and blossomed and will continue to do so, but I think that for you it was amazing to connect with someone else who was able to really understand you, and you guys had this give and take friendship where you could be there for each other in a way that I wasn't able, like Judith, I wasn't able to fully understand you and say, I've been there, I know. So I do think that having that special friend in your life really did help you in a way, just like evolve in your grief journey. So
I remember, this is just a side note, I remember like after Aiden died a few weeks later, there was a shooting. Like, I saw that all the flags were half mast, and I remember calling Miriam and be like, did something happen? Like, why everyone seems upset? Like, I had no idea what was going on in the universe. And Miriam's like, yeah, Judith, there was this really bad shooting. Like, a lot of people were killed. It was like, I think in a nail salon. I like truly had no idea what was going on in the universe. Zero. And Miriam would like tell me snippets of like what was
because
happening.
Yeah, you told me, you're like, Miriam, if anything really big happens that I need to know, just like 9/11 scale event, please tell me, because I'm so disconnected, like in my whole,
It's
like
true.
that's what you told me.
I really, I would
so
have no idea.
that I don't know, and please tell me, because. So
Let
I
me
would
ask.
text you. I'd be like, Judith, there was like a big event, and or I would tell you.
Yeah,
things that were going on.
because I would not have known. Thing I wanted to say, I feel like it wasn't just like that Miriam cried with me. It's that she laughed with me also.
Mhm.
Because it didn't feel like this friendship was like bad. It felt like it was still
It wasn't
good.
bad.
It was just different.
It was just different.
It was
That's
just
great.
different.
I love that you said that.
It wasn't bad. It just
exactly.
was. We spoke about different things, but we still laughed, and like we still had good. Like there was still good when I look back on it. It wasn't like icky. It felt like, yeah, my friend Miriam, and she's just doing this shitty thing with me. And other thing, and this was something I was asked, like when my husband lost his job, when my parents said they were getting divorced, like what did you think? Like when, like from the outside, like when it was like the bad train just didn't stop, like what were you thinking? Were you just like, oh my God?
I do remember thinking like, oh my God, you cannot catch a break. Like there's just no brakes on this train that has taken off. Like since Aiden died, it was one thing after another thing. Like it was just like you couldn't. How could you even catch your feet? Because the second you caught balance, like something knocked you off again. Yeah. And it was just one thing after another. I remember feeling so grateful, obviously, for Dr. Mendel and like.
Shout out to Dr. Mendel. We love Dr. Mendel.
We love her.
I'll link her
That's
episode.
another thing I'll say is that Miriam knows every doctor I visited. She knows every medication I was on. She knows every person that I've interacted with. She knows every lost mom I speak to, and she knows their children's names. And if she doesn't know, she'll be like, remind me again, what's Rachel's son's name? Remind me again, what's Dina's daughter's name? Like she wants to know. Like when I say that she carried the burden with me, she knew Dr. Brock's phone number, my OBGYN. She knew my new OBGYN's name. She's like, what did Dr. Bannon say? She knew my therapist, my psychiatrist. She knew every doctor that I had an appointment with, every medication I was on, every mom I came in encounter with. Literally every single part she was keeping track. She must have like had notes somewhere where she was like, Judith saw Dr. Brock has an appointment. I know she put my anatomy scan in her phone. She would put my phone appointments, my doctor appointments in her phone. That way she could ask me about them.
Do that.
Like if that's not a good friend, I feel like I've learned from you. I now put people's death anniversaries in my phone. I put like when you were worried about your daughter, I put your doctor's appointments in my phone so I could ask you about it. Like you were on top of your shit. Nothing escapes you.
No, I just want to say for everyone who has a grieving friend, stick it out. It's worth it, right? Friendship is a lifetime, like what Judith said. And I'm so glad that we went through this together. I think we're closer now than we were before. And like we have a lifetime ahead of us to go.
Yeah.
So.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow. Yay!